Hey folks, welcome to the first episode of What TF Happened this week. Me and Paras, we are best buddies, and the reason we are recording this is most of the times I'm in Paras's house on a Friday evening, and we are having a couple of beers and whatnot. And few people told us that whatever conversations we are having is what we should record, and that is where this idea came from. And Paras was very, very, very supportive in this to be able to say, you know what, let's why not do it. And earlier, Paras used to run a podcast called Bold Conjectures, which is very, very deep topic, but also slightly boring. I mean, I could listen to one of his episodes and I was
Yeah,
like,
one of the testimonials was that it put people to sleep, and I thought that was awesome.
yeah,
I
it
had
was
like a
my
sleep
sleep
therapy going
pills,
on.
basically, Paras. So this is our first episode. We are trying it out, and we don't know how it's gonna go.
Thanks, Pallav. It's been wonderful knowing you all these years. Last year, I think moved 1.5 years back now. Time flies, and we've had such amazing conversations every Friday over beers. I drink one beer, and you're like, you don't even get started. After 10 beers also, so those who know Pallav would know, he really gets animated after 10 beers. That's when he starts pepping up. But yeah, we've had such good conversations, and Akanksha said you guys should do a podcast, and here we are. Earlier, like Pallav said, I've done very serious podcast. So this one I'm trying to be just get on a Zoom call, record it, and so that's why I didn't even care to shave, because I really want this to be honest and not a made up podcast, right? I want to get to sort of talk about very, very personal things with Pallav, talk about what's happening in tech. And it's, yeah, basically two friends having a friendly chat over a Sunday, beautiful morning. So, yeah. So, Pallav, tell me what has been up on your mind. I know you've been very much involved in generative AI. So, yeah, last few weeks, what have you been up to? What have you learned?
So basically, I'll have to give a little bit of history on this. So this I was a DevTools guy till about 2020, sold Fusion Charts in 2020. Then I was building Tableau equivalent, sold that last year. And since then, I've been sort of unemployed, quasi unemployed. First 3 months,
Unemployed multimillionaire. Let me say that.
uh, Paras coming to me, it doesn't sound good. So, I mean, true, but yeah, let's go with that.
But still unemployed. Let's
Still
just say that.
unemployed.
Yeah.
So there's always been this itch, and if you've been a founder and entrepreneur, you always sort of look forward to what next, the meaning, the purpose. The money is, yeah, money is one part of it, but you're always looking for a problem statement to solve, and you're sort of trying to figure out what's happening in the world. Spent about 3 months in Web3, figured out that a lot of it is hammered looking for a nail. Then spent now 3 months in something else, which is about AI mixed with content. And then October, November, December, if you know Pallav, I always party. Then starting this year, January hit, and I was like, what is the next big trend? And most of the times when you're looking at building a new company, you're looking at sort of a big trend. And trend could be what Jamaat says, integration of fusion of actually hardware and software. And what I saw with GPT and what I saw with AI, it was very interesting to be able to say, hey, here's a corpus of words knowledge, and here's a natural language interface to interact with it. And the moment you allow anybody to be able to talk to a computer in a language which people are used to, that was magical. Yeah. If you look at every single tech, it started with a toy. And when I started doing chats with OpenAI's ChatGPT, it was absolutely amazing. Yeah, it was hallucinating. And the moment you start sort of thinking about it on how much, what is the value of it and what you can do with it. I've been a B2B SaaS guy. So a couple of thoughts emerge in my mind. When the world's knowledge is accessible to you, what can you do with it? Support desk system, L1
Yeah.
support.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You're basically a parrot, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
You're saying, somebody taught me this. I'm going to repeat the same information.
Yeah. So that's, I think the thing with generative AI, and that's like, I don't like buzzwords, but let's just use it for the lack of a better term. I mean, the thing is, when you like as you're saying, the world knowledge compressed in a model. Most of our economy is, at least in tech circles, it's knowledge work, right? And with GPT-4 now, they have image processing capability as well. It can read text in an image. And imagine like you feeding screens of your laptop screen into GPT-4. It has access to mouse and it has access to keyboard. That's literally what you're doing all day long. So if it's able to see what's in an image and do this input output, given how powerful its reasoning sort of systems are, it's frightening and it's exciting at the same time, right? And unlike you, I think you were mentioning that you're excited about it from what its potential. I think I am more excited from the other point of view, which is to see how can a software system be so intelligent. So I started really my AI passion and obsession when I was 12 years old. I used to write long documents on how to make computer systems come alive. I remember there was a document called AI Being that I was writing with the hope of making first artificially conscious agent. I was 12 years old, and now in my lifetime, to see these first glimpses of a system that can do which I, as a kid, was just imagining and fantasizing about. I think it's truly a great time to be alive. A scary time, but um, like
So I'm gonna pick
I
on
feel we're living
humans.
in history. I feel we're living in history. We're going through history that in 50, 100 years, people will look back with the same kind of fascination as we look back when, say, telescope was invented or when the first transistor was invented. I think one thing which is missing right now is in large language models, the feedback, wherein large language models are just like a forward pass. That's why if you've ever played with ChatGPT, there's a very interesting dynamic that emerges. Sometimes it makes a mistake for the first time when you're asking something, but when you tell it that, hey, dude, you made a mistake, then it apologizes and corrects and gives a better answer. And to me, that's a very fascinating phenomena, because the way large language models are structured, right? You have several layers, and you input the text and it doesn't have any feedback loop, so it cannot think back. So there's an experiment you can do. You can ask ChatGPT to sort of count the words, tell me the number of words that will be in the answer to this question, which requires you to form the answer first and then know number of words you've had in the answer. As humans, we can do very easily, right? We can say one, and one, of course, it just uses one word. But ChatGPT cannot do that because there is no feedback loop involved. Once it starts generating, token by token, word by word, it just keeps on going until the end token comes. So I think the next beautiful thing, which is very important in reasoning and which happens in a brain, which is so much of feedback loops, is where there'll be like a feedback loop that will go on, wherein the output of a large language model fed back into it, it will get improved, fed back again, it will get improved. And I think that's where like a fascinating thread of reasoning emerges. And that's why there's also a trick. If you've noticed, this trick is called, whenever you ask a question, you prompt ChatGPT by saying, let's think step by step. So just by addition of let's think step by step, it's able to output a stream of text that eventually helps a final answer. So
So I think
that's very important from a reasoning point of view. And I think second, which GPT-4 has picked up, which is extremely important, is this multimodal input. Multimodal input means where you're not just feeding it text, but you're feeding it videos, you're feeding it audio, you're feeding it images. Now, what happens is that it's just not that image helps, it's an image recognition, but I think image helps it in better textual modeling, and textual modeling helps it in better. So there is like a 2 + 2 greater than 4 kind of phenomena that's happening. So suddenly it knows that the cars are behaving in a certain way. So if you've seen like a video and you feed in a video in a large language model and you see an apple fall from the tree to the ground, it knows the phenomena of gravity in a much more intuitive way than just reading Wikipedia entry on gravity. And so to me, this is again the second thread, which is fascinating.
and what is scary?
The scariest, I mean, I heard this line on Hacker News, which said that, AI, AI will take our jobs, and that's a good thing, but our economy is not designed for it.
Mm,
So the The scary part is not that we'll be out of jobs. I think, job I'm defining as something which you don't want to do, but you have to do for a living. Um,
Okay.
so in that sense, who wants to do a job, right? You want to play, you want to have fun, you want to talk to friends. Nobody wants to do a job that they don't like. So in that sense, all that new technology should automate away all the grunt work. But our economy is not designed for this. The scary part is that uh, the big will get bigger with Microsoft, Google, everyone investing so much in large language models, billions of dollars making big models. I think wealth concentration is going to get higher, and there's going to be, like, I think, big disruptions, because to me the net wealth will increase in the world because we are making things cheaper by replacing humans who could do, like, say, one piece of work in one day, now one piece of work in like 10 seconds. So net wealth is going up, and wealth, as I'm defining, it's the amount of useful things in the world, but that wealth will not get equally distributed.
There's going to be displacement and dislocation of jobs, and there's going to be new jobs always created. In that sense, in the entire economy and society. Now, the displacement and dislocation is what is going to create a political sort of roar and furor. But new people will figure it out. The fuck up which will happen is, right now, are we prepared from it from a society perspective? And you're absolutely right to be able to say who is going to benefit the most. So if you look at the infra players, the top three infra players in the cloud space is Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Amazon being at the number one. All the models are going to be out there. All the infrastructure is going to be out there. LLMs, if you've seen Alpaca, if you've seen Llama, if you've seen Palm, some of them are saying, hey, more parameters. Some of them are saying less parameters. Some of them saying, I can run on your phone. And here's a fun thing I heard. Overall, in the web, there's only 17 trillion tokens available in human language, in English.
Yeah.
So let's say somebody achieves all of that in less than $650 for a training model, which costs less than a couple of $100,000, because that is where the most cost is. And you vectorize it and you get the embeddings right, then that's available to everybody. So the question which I've been asking myself, and this is a very open question. If OpenAI is going to be $1 trillion company, why would they sell, I don't know, 20-30% to Microsoft for 10 billion? What's your thought?
Yeah, I think we did touch upon this when we were last time drinking beers at my place. I think I agree. The moat is not very strong. I mean, I don't see how can you defend against text being openly available and there being competitors like Google and even Anthropic and other startups that are training their own large language models. And I think it's sort of like an arms race where people will train bigger and bigger models with more and more text, more and more data, but nothing is proprietary here, right? The architecture is very well known. I think it's literally 40 lines of Python code. If you go by Kaparthi's Nano GPT, you can train your own GPT if you have enough money and enough
Compute.
enough money. Actually, I mean, that's a limiting constraint. Enough compute, but I'm betting that enough money can buy enough compute. Money makes things go around, but again, like, what's the mode there?
So
and
question
and
I
it,
ask,
that's where it's not surprising that GPT-4 has barely any technical information. So instead of more, companies are starting to rely on secrets, which is what, like, Coca-Cola did, right? Where they've never revealed their sort of recipe because they feel it'll get copied. And of course, it's a marketing ploy, but that's where the industry is going, which is less
very
true
industry.
modes.
So let me ask you a question. Paras, you've been a SaaS guy, very successful at Wingify. Imagine you're running Wingify right now, which I know you're not. You're running NT right now. Let's say SaaS company is trying to figure out what do we need to do with GenAI. And basically, most SaaS companies are CRUD apps with workflows, right?
Yeah.
And the way I look at GenAI is basically there are three things which will happen. You augment a workflow, you replace a workflow, or you replace the JDBD itself.
Yeah.
From your experience in this sense, so if it's a very, very deep enterprise workflow, maybe you're not. So, but what Microsoft did with Copilot, and they had this beautiful future of work video. From your opinion, what does the future of SaaS mean from a Gen AI perspective to be able to say, and how do they adopt the LLMs and how do they fine tune the data and who's gonna win?
Yeah, I'll tell you what we did. We actually had, we have still a hackathon running in Wingify, generative AI. And I was thinking we'll get maybe 10, 15 ideas with a few teams. We had 100, more than 100 ideas across the
Whoa.
company. And this made me realize that it just infuses everything, every single aspect of the product, every single aspect of the company. People came up with ideas on generative AI, and they're building, yeah, they're hacking together prototypes on it. And it's also not something which will take like 6 months to build something. The deadline is a couple of days away, and some of the prototypes are already ready. So I think, um, I would urge all the SaaS companies to, I don't think, um, like, they can always think about framework, like you were talking about GTPD, etc. But if you simply start thinking about what different aspects of your products exist, what is your product's north star, and not just about the product also, but even the backend operations. For example, I read one person who did this very clever cold emails where he scraped websites, and every single email that he sent out was personalized to the extent that you obviously cannot do when you're cold emailing. And when prospects replied, even the reply was generated through GPT-4, which was customized. So why just think about, and of course, I mean, I feel a little sad about this also, because this tells me the world will soon be full of
Bots,
computers
bots.
pretending to be humans, and that gets into like a different territory. I mean, it is actually sad, and that I do feel more and more physical spaces will become important, because that's the only way you'll be able to distinguish bots from humans, at least for a few decades or maybe few years. And the trust levels will go down. But having said that, I don't think you can play a Luddite here when it comes to how things are changing. So I'm putting my personal preferences aside of how I think about the sort of bad aspects of generative AI, where computers are pretending to be humans and generating very similar looking text. I mean, now I can tell from like 100 feet away if the text is generated through GPT or not. And it saddens me when people send their email applications which are GPT generated. I'm like, please put in some effort. This just
Okay,
looks
so let me
ridiculous.
ask you one question. When you get an email, code email, how do you know it's GPT generated or a human written?
I can tell. I think
How?
I've seen enough GPT generated
So
output. I can
give
immediately
us
tell.
three clues, Paris.
Sorry.
Give us three clues when you know it's GPT generated versus somebody who actually took the pains to be able to research out who Paris is, who Wingify is, or VW is, and you want to
I
identify.
think it's because I mean, it's of course a function of how OpenAI trained its models. And in fact, it's interesting. Whatever people are ending up writing is a bias carried from how OpenAI instructed their human labelers to write it. So in a sense, that is getting amplified across the world. And so imagine there is a team in OpenAI, maybe led by one person, who said, "This is how we need to write, which needs to be formal, which needs to be simple, and so on." And of course, every person or a group of people have a certain style. So that style is now getting carried on whenever GPT 3 or 4 outputs something.
Right.
And I think I can tell the way Pallav writes or someone else writes. In similar way, I can tell the way OpenAI, leader of human feedback, prefers to write. And that's getting sort of, yeah, seeped into everywhere. And especially it's also true if you've never seen someone write so well, and suddenly you get a message from them. You're like,
Okay,
dude,
that's
what's
being
happening?
judgmental,
Don't do
Paris.
that.
That's being
I know what trick you're playing, and it's not gonna play.
So, okay, then two honest questions to that. So, for example, now everybody has an access to tool like this. Earlier, like for example, me and you tried in writing good emails. Now the equilibrium has been sort of up by a tool. Number two, what happens to the future of email and SEO, outbound emails and SEO? Because everybody can write a good email because of a tool.
Yeah.
SEO,
So
everybody can write content. Everybody can also, in your company also, like everybody can write like great fucking web copy. So when these tools sort of forward the humanity to be able to say, hey, it's available to everybody, and the equilibrium is sort of raising. What happens to the arms race?
yeah. So I'll tell you, I mean, it's not future, it's present. I've stopped checking my emails altogether. is this so much of sort of cold emails that come with, even if it's personalized, I just know now my sort of bullshit detectors are up all the time on email. So and increasingly it's harder to reach out to people on email. If you've noticed, cold emails now, it's just mostly through introductions. And gone are the days of early days in web where you could email anyone and expect a reply, because and that was honest conversation. And now it's just marketers have taken over the world.
Slightly changing topics. What would you recommend for B2B SaaS companies in India to be able to reach out to their customers and differentiate?
Yeah, I think now GPT-3 4 enables you to do like deep research. So instead of using it as a very dumb way to generalize so-called personalized messages, I would use it to actually, I mean, I would still retain the entire team, outbound team, research team, but do depersonalization. Think of ways to penetrate an account, strategize, use GPT-3 4 as a resource to think. Uh, and I mean, and really sort of try to hyper personalize their approach, um, their outbound. Marketing is becoming harder by each passing month. There's just more and more things out there, and with like, I mean, you're playing with a zero sum game, right? When it comes to human attention, and it's always hopping onto the so content. I mean, I tweeted once that content marketing is dead, but content marketers haven't realized it. With so much of
Oh, wait. Elaborate that. That's a very deep statement you just made. Content
yeah.
marketing is dead,
So I'm
but
using content marketing in a very specific way. Of course, content in the most generic of most abstract sense of content will never be dead. Everything is content. Even this is content. But I meant content marketing as it happened when I started, say, in 2010 and until 2015, 16, where you could write a really good article and see it ranked on Google, get traffic, convert. And I think it's to do with the nature of search results also. Now, Google has largely been taken over by SEO spam. You don't find quality articles. In fact, I was reflecting that now almost all my Google searches are for finding local businesses. So Google Maps is perhaps a bigger asset for Google than Google search. I find dentists around me, stationery shops around me, and so on. But I rely on Reddit so much more because I feel I'll get honest opinions. So that content marketing is dead to me. And I think all other content marketing where people used to do webinars and all that, human attention is now taken over by TikToks, Instagram, and so on. And that's true for B2B people also, right? They're not immune to being distracted.
surprised you
So
didn't mention 9gag.
yeah, I spend a lot of time on 9gag, and in fact, I've discovered a few products on 9gag. And so in that sense, I meant that content marketing, where I mean, where people are spending their time and how their attention spans are evolving. I think that's very decoupled with the fact uh, with how companies, B2B companies in India are running their content marketing. I think they're still stuck in the same thing of launching guides, writing blog posts, doing webinars, where nobody's reading them. It's just like a ghost town.
What will change? So let me poke you slightly deeper into this. I know we're going off topic here, Paris, but a lot of people say, hey, we need to do thought leadership content or seminal content. And it is very, very, very freaking hard to be able to do it.
Yeah.
This last piece you release seminal. In our case, at least at Fusion Charts, I'm going to give you a story. So when we hit about 10 years of our journey, we released a book of basically what we called boo-boos we did in the company. Sanket wrote the book, my younger brother, and the CMO at the company at that point in time. It is a very fun book, not just another pie in the sky. And people love content which is personal. People love content which is what relates to them.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about thought leadership and seminal content, there are two kinds, either emotional or functional. How do you look at it?
So I think functional content is mostly documentation, and people read it in context of the problem they are solving, right? So to me, if marketing has to evolve on two fronts, think one front is every company needs to be a media business. So you really have to think like a media company, even B2B companies, wherein you have to, and that relates to emotional things, right? So can you think like a media company? Can you like give entertaining and spicy content out there, which is not boring webinar people just walking you through a presentation? I think those days are gone. There's so much of content out there that unless it stands out almost like a sitcom or a Netflix series, you'll not get attention. That to me on one end, that if you're serious about marketing, think that your job is not marketing but building like a media house, and it's extremely difficult, but that's the only way you'll stand out if you want to do that. And on the other end, I feel a lot of functional content needs to be replaced by actual products, where the bifurcation between what's a product and what's a marketing is increasingly gone. uh, Nobody has time to read text and then take action. Your product has to demonstrate the value right from the first 10 seconds. So whether it means launching like a free version of your product which has absolutely mind-blowing first experiences, or whether it means launching something else which people can play with. I mean, essentially people want that interactivity um, of being engaged within first seconds, 10 seconds, instead of reading through like a 200-page book or like a 1 hour long podcast. They don't have it. So in that sense, marketing is becoming a continuum for product. And to me, if
Unless
I were to
people,
think about marketing, I would think
honestly,
it.
people will listen to 1 hour podcast.
Yeah, but if it's entertaining, it's entertaining. You cannot bore them. So, dude, you were so excited about Web3 and you were like, this is going to change the world and so on. So, how do you connect that to what's happening now? Because you're equally excited. And the part of me uh, worries whether we are over indexing on what AI is going to do, the thing, what AI is going to sort of change in the world. And if we'll repeat the mistakes of what happened in the crypto with all the hype and it didn't really materialize. I mean, it didn't materialize to the extent everyone thought it would.
No, you're absolutely right. So Web3 was, and so when I went into Web3 last year, basically I sold my second company. I was like basically clueless on what to do. I was basically looking at, hey, you know what is a trend? What is a new tech? And when I looked at blockchain, great tech. Started coding my smart contracts and to be able to do the ZK lookup and all those philosophy. Good cryptography. Part of me is still an engineer. Part of me is still a business guy. The only place where I realized that this is still a hammer looking for a nail is the only problems they were solving, and I might be absolutely wrong, is basically they said cross-border payments, censorship resistant, which for real China and Russia blocked, so that didn't work out. NFT is a sort of like basically proof of ownership of a digital asset. Yeah, I do have a couple of very good monkeys and
I've saved them on my laptop, so
yeah,
don't worry
that's
if you
on
lose
my
them.
Twitter profile. So here's the fun thing. Do I regret doing that? No. The one thing I've realized, and this is based on Paul Graham's, if you have read his article, how to find startup ideas.
Yeah.
Uh, Half the times you don't know what's going to work. We have Gartner's hype cycle. We have all your doctors on a whole bunch of things. Even if you're not building, be a part of that journey. So I was a part of that journey of Web3 to be able to say, hey, yeah, now it looks like a bunch of stupid monkeys, but at that point in time, they look very cute.
Yeah.
Bunch of other NFTs. But the thing about if you are in tech and you want to sort of push the paradigm, uh, be a part of it. The cost
Yeah.
to you has to be sort of subliminal, and you get to enjoy that journey to be able to sort of say, हाँ, मेरे पास भी एक बंदर है.
Yeah, I think I think that's
Yeah,
an important. You made a very important point. I think essentially predicting future is extremely hard.
be a
Hard
part of
not in
that.
the sense of like you have to be sharp. I think the sharpest people are wrong maybe more often than the average person, because they overthink stuff. But it's hard because world is a complex system, right, with so many of interacting dynamics. And the only thing you can do is to like perhaps place your bets. Talk about something which shows a more real you. So I'm curious because whenever people meet entrepreneurs like you, successful, sold multiple companies, they'll feel like this guy has sorted it out. Everything, his life is sorted. That's what we like to call, right? But what are you most afraid of? And yeah, what are, if I may ask, some of your insecurities that you're trying to overcome?
That's a great question, Par. So I'm gonna first reply with a proverb. The young guys knows the rule, the old guys knows the exception. So what happens when you've sort of worked with a couple of companies and sold a few of them? The biggest fear that you start with is what will not work. So the innocence of starting and not knowing what will not work is absolutely beautiful, because at that point in time you have raw freaking passion and you're like, chalo karte hain, dekha jayega jo hoga. And the older you grow and the more sort of, for like a better, wiser you become, you're always thinking about like 10 different dimensions. What is my mode? Who's going to compete with me? Why I'm going to win? uh Part of it takes joy of creation away from you, and which is where the way I'm countering that with right now is, I'm like, you know what, the first company I started, Fusion Charts, was, let's just freaking do it. You start coding, you start coding shit out, you see people responding to it, you have no idea of what TAM, SOM, or SAM is, and you start with the joy of creation. But then you also realize there are two kinds of entrepreneurs in the world: people who create just for the love of creation, and people who create because they have an end goal in mind. Uh, After second sale, last year when I was doing Web3, I think I sort of morphed myself into the fact that I wanted to start with the end goal. But obviously, after a lot of conversations with you, Paras, over the last year, I realized I'm a creator and I'm like, just create. Good things will happen. It doesn't matter who loves you, who doesn't love you, as long as somebody finds value. And we have one of this very interesting statement to me. There are two ways to build a company. Sorry, there are two phases to building a company: create value, capture value. And right now I'm in the create value stage, in the Gen AI stage. So right now I've sort of taken a step back and I'm like, doesn't matter what is the end goal. Let's figure out a way to create value. And also, second thing, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, a lot of us start with so the second kind of entrepreneur is going to start with the goal key. I'm going to make I don't know what, 100 million, a billion, or whatever the fuck this is. Uh, Unfortunately, a lot of those, while you sort of extrapolate and you work it backwards, there's a market force behind you. And if it doesn't happen, you're not going to be satisfied if you don't hit that goal. And this is very, very, very simple human nature, because we are competitive as fuck as founders. We want to achieve our goals. But if you start enjoying the journey more than the outcome, that is where the fun begins. So I've taken advice, Paras. I'm like, let me
Are
just figure
you, Pallav, afraid of failing in public?
after this episode one, no.
Yeah, because yeah, you were talking about, I mean, and not just you, I think that is just ingrained in us. And it's so surprising that the more successful we are, the more we want to preserve status quo, but the more limiting it becomes. So
Absolutely.
in that sense, I want to intentionally do things that
No, so let me then question you on this. Why you are running a fairly successful B2B company called Wingify VWO, what about 40 million ARR, bootstrap, number three bootstrap company in India after Zoho and Zerodha, and you decide to switch your tax and build a new one. Tell me your philosophy then, and what went through your mind.
yeah, I think my life has always been about learning things that I am not good at. So as soon as I figured out the game, I think it becomes boring for me, relatively boring, and I want to figure out something new. And that's been, I think, the larger sense, been the trend in my life. Wingify I did, it was not the first attempt at doing something. It was like fourth and fifth, and I kept trying because I had that knack, which seeing it as a puzzle that I need to crack it. And every time it was failing when I was doing my first three things, I'm like, I'm not that dumb. So why I'm not able to figure out getting users to my product, get making some money. So I kept just sort of chipping at it until Wingify broke. And once Wingify broke, it started scaling. Initial few years, learned a lot as an entrepreneur, didn't even know what does hiring someone means, didn't even know what management. So it was a lot of fun learning that went along the way. But after a period of time, I think companies become less about excitement, more about just sitting through and scaling the playbook. And at that point of time, I felt my learning curve was plateauing. Of course, it's uncorrelated with how the company is growing, because I felt I could apply what I had learned and just kept doing it again and again and again, and company would grow. And I also felt that there are other people who derived more joy in doing the same things and doing them well than me, who's always been about the next shiny new thing and trying to figure out what I don't know. So in that sense, I took a step back, went on a sabbatical, wrote started a blog, Inverted Passion, wrote a book. So I was essentially doing everything that I wasn't comfortable with. And my new company Ninty is consumer business, trying to build a game around helping people get better in life. And again, it's something I've never done before. And similarly, I raised funding this time because I never did it before. And so to me, it's about intentionally breaking the status quo and trying to push myself out to do things I've not done and risking failing horribly at it. I know that there's lots of things I'll fail, but
Parsh,
that's a
but
fun.
me and you both have been accused of we had the early advantage, and we could have gone IPO. I could have scaled up a lot more beyond. And obviously, we made a personal choices to be able to be comfortable as a founder, to be able to say, when we started, this is a reason we started. How do you sort of justify to yourself? And obviously, at a much larger stage in that sense of the company, and you sort of, or not say abdicated, but relinquished the control to your partner Sposh, and then you said, I'm going to start afresh. It's a very hard decision, because most founders don't want to let go of their baby, their identity, because the infusion of the founder and the company is so strong. How were you able
Yeah.
to come out
So
of
yeah, I've never strongly identified with any single thing I was involved with. So ever, even like I don't think Wingify and me are the same thing. So in that sense, I've always diversified my identity across multiple things. So I've never let go of my personal projects, even while I was running Wingify. So it wasn't that hard. I mean, I've never felt, and I still don't feel that there's like destiny that I need to do XYZ with Wingify, that I need to take an IPO. My sense is like focus on the fundamentals, keep on growing it, but derive pleasure out of the process instead of the outcome. So I really don't know what is the outcome. And if I don't know what's the outcome, then the process has given me value over the last 13 years, right? The joy has been turning up at work and doing great work for that day, and not towards some ultimate end outcome, which I've never very strongly felt identified with. So, in fact, my primary motivation is to do things I'm not good at. And so, surprisingly for me, it was very easy to say that I think I've more or less mastered the art of being CEO at a B2B SaaS company. So now it's time to do something else.
is that nature versus nurture? Because one of the things most founders are very bad at is sort of diffusing this identity between the company and them. And this is where they sort of go into, for lack of a better word, depression or downtrend in the
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
if my company fails, it's my failure. And
yeah.
you're saying,
That's why.
I succeeded and that is not me. What is your one advice to founder before we change tack and look at what we've been following on Twitter and Hacker News?
Yeah, I think my single biggest advice is to attribute, um, I mean, attribute success to yourself, but attribute failure to luck. Uh,
So easy to say.
but I'm just joking. But I would say attribute mostly almost all outcomes to luck and chance. It's not like, I mean, I tweeted the other day, 2 days back, that if you see wealth is distributed in a power law fashion, 1% of the wealthiest have more wealth than the other 99%. So it goes like this. But the skill or intelligence follows like a normal distribution. You do not have like 1% of people with 99% of intelligence. It's like height, right? It's a natural skill. So what
Correct.
explains if people's skill level intelligence is a normal distribution, but outcomes in terms of wealth is a power law? I think it's luck. And simulations have proven it luck. And if it's luck, I think it takes a lot of responsibility out of shoulders, that you have to sort of do something historically great with your life or company. Because if luck is doing all the job, all you can do is just turn up on the day and give it your best, right? I mean, the whole Gita's message that कर्म करे जा फल की इच्छा मत कर, that is because फल तुम्हारे हाथ में नहीं है. You can't, if there is so many of random factors in the market, suddenly the Fed lowers Fed lowers interest rate, VC funding booms, salaries go high, your key hire goes away, your company fails. Like, you are not responsible for that. Why beat yourself for something some six guys in US Fed decided? I find that extremely absurd. So that's why I attribute almost everything. I mean, I attribute outcomes to luck. Only thing I can control is my inputs, and that I try to do an honest job of.
Agree. I'm assuming you're a big fan of Taleb's book, Fooled by Randomness.
Yeah, I've read it. Although he blocked me on Twitter, I'm still blocked on his Twitter.
Why?
I mean, I think it's long back. I asked, he was saying something. He's comes across as aggressive, and I was questioning him on something, and he says, you are an intellectual yet idiot. His favorite word, and he blocked me. I'm like, okay. I don't even know you. I didn't even know you'll look at my reply, but here we are.
Let's see what you've been reading for the last week.
Yeah.
Twitter and both Hacker News.
How do I share my screen?
I just did that.
Okay.
And also give me commentary on what excited you for each of those. And I'll show you my Twitter, what I've been reading and what excited me about it.
Okay. Yeah, let me share my screen. You see it?
I do, yeah. Zoom it.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, so I mean, I spend almost all my time on Hacker News, and that's what I'm going to. I've taken some articles out of Hacker News, which resonated with me quite a lot. So I'm going to talk about them. The first one is this one, where the company behind Stable Diffusion appears to be at risk of going under, which is surprising for me. This is a company.
Paras on this. Did you see? I'm going to tell you a fun fact. This article came this early morning when I woke up at 4 o'clock. Uske baad Imad on his Twitter posted a photo with Jeff Bezos.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Jeff Bezos and him having lunch, dinner, whatever it is, basically is connected to some of the most powerful people in the world who can unlock a lot of money.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, this is an interesting thing you said, because Amazon so far hasn't done a lot in large language models and AI space. It seems surprisingly for such a big company, they've been left behind. Google has been doing stuff, and of course, Microsoft via OpenAI, and Facebook has been very, very active as well with their Llama and even the new segmentation. Yeah, but Amazon hasn't done it, and especially they are sitting on lots of voice recordings from Alexa. They have all the world's books, possibly for ingesting them. So maybe that's an angle they might be exploring. Who knows?
Let me ask you a different question then. Stability has raised 100 billion. Midjourney is an 11-person company, bootstrapped. Obviously, the guy is very, very, very deep credoed. Both of them are sort of changing the industry in an open way. Midjourney through Discord, not fully open model, but stability through open model. This is sort of a question for about open source startup versus ghost source startup. Even if they're running out of funds, what do you think is going to be end story for them? And they're actually pretty good.
I think if they've already generated value, Stability Diffusion, I think they've already generated value. And the article is precisely about this. Like you were saying, value creation and value capture is two different things. They've created a lot of value, but it seems it's harder for them to capture value for themselves. And they've burnt out. The article says they've burnt out with almost all their funding. And now the existing investors are having questions whether they should participate in a follow-up round, because the path to revenue is not clear. If you are giving away your models for free, how are you going to make money? it's a difficult question to answer, and I don't know how they are going to do it. But I also feel that doing something like this was inevitable. This is the only viable differentiation strategy a company could have had when they were really good closed models like OpenAI's GPT-3. So it's also not a matter of, I mean, the strategy is not also a matter of purely your choice. The market context plays a big role. And in that sense, they've done an incredible job of differentiating themselves.
So one of the accusations in the article is basically, if I read it right, they don't own the models, unlike a Midjourney or Runway ML. That has been the accusation. Now, let's say from an IP perspective, if you're open source or not, whether you own or not, the most of the value in the current Gen AI is about data and compute.
That is what I disagree with. That's what I said, that I think the moat is thinner and thinner, which means models are not going to be big differentiators. With Google coming along, like it's compute, right? It's compute and data is available, architecture is available. So like many other products, the distribution becomes the moat. Where the OpenAI's ChatGPT ploy was so clever, because suddenly now they have distribution across millions of users, and who cares what's the underlying model is, as long as they're performing similarly.
Perfect. Take care.
Yeah.
Yes.
The second one, which was similarly themed, which is LangChain announced their seed round, a $10 million one, which is so surprising.
Oh, I didn't see this. Why?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, LangChain is a open source library for interacting with large language models. It allows you to chain different calls so you can do complex things. So I saw a graphic. It was the fastest rising GitHub project in number of stars, faster than many other. In fact, it was just on fire, and they raised a seed round. I don't know what they're going to do with the money. It's an open source project, but this article where Stable Diffusion is trying to be under, and then this open source project raising 10, it's a little bit on the odds, because to me, I mean, if an open source company like Stable Diffusion, Stability is going under while other VCs are still funding open source projects, I don't know what their thesis is. But the interesting bit in this Hacker News commentary was people were overwhelmingly negative about this, where everyone thought their trust was betrayed, because in Hacker News, people contributed to LangChain by submitting PR requests, by helping improve their documentation. So now if you see, people will like, see, after spending time, they were just very, very negative, and they're like, I'm not going to help with LangChain anymore. So the open source and funding dynamics, I don't think I've understood it really well. I think there are very few examples of companies that have done it well, like Red Hat. But
Red Hat is old Paras. Mongo, Elastic, Postman, whole bunch of companies. So open source is about adoption. Hasura also in that sense, and GraphQL. The only sort of my personal view is the path to monetization from open source should not kill the soul of the open source. And there have been companies where the soul has been killed because they started restricting the features and everything. Red Hat did not monetize their main product. They monetized the training, they monetized the DevOps version of it. Back then it was called sysadmin. So open source में the only thing I sort of look forward to is great adoption. Don't kill your core audience and don't kill your soul. That is my personal view.
yeah, but the third one is much harder if you've raised funding, because it becomes, I mean, then you're obligated for growth. You're taking on that responsibility.
Do the good growth. There are so many layers around open source also. So there are like enterprise unlocking, learning unlocking, monitoring unlocking, security unlocking. But the crux, so most of the open source is sort of adopted by individual developers. Enable them, allow the teams to work out. Once it goes to the CIO or CTO or in that sort, especially in enterprise, monetize that. But never, never, never screw up with your original soul. Been a
Yeah,
part of
but my point is, like with open source projects, whenever there is a new feature, if you are this VC funded company with open source model, and you'll always be conflicted whether to give it in open source or whether to keep it outside of open source. So proprietary, that there's the fundamental like conflict that these companies must need to navigate day in and day out. And that must, I mean, corrupt the soul a little bit, right, along the way.
Which is why you need to take a very informed choice. Okay, hypothetically, if you were doing VW open source, what are the features you will restrict and what are the features you will monetize? Just for a general conversation.
Yeah, so actually we are planning something in VW which would be open source. But the way we are thinking about it is open source things from trust point of view, that open source is great from demonstrating that you can trust us. Like if we are storing sensitive data, if we require someone to trust a closed system, the best way is to open source the part of that closed system. We're not going ahead with open source from a point of view of like uh, making it like from a business decision point of view, from an adoption point of view. So I would rather keep the parts of the system which people would have difficulty trusting as open source, but then close source everything else.
Better.
If,
So
if I were to go open source completely, then I would just go it full blown in a non-profit style, not like half open source and half closed source sort of a thing.
sure. So earlier open source, let's say starting 2010, when the paradigm of open source starting to get adoption and enterprise started. Back then in 2010, enterprises would not trust open source, and it was sort of a open market then. If you do open source, by default, you will have a little bit of noise. Right now, we're in 2023. There are about, I don't know what, 3 million GitHub projects which are open source or probably more. So the open sourcing as a marketing strategy has sort of been commoditized, and you still
Yeah.
need to do a lot more. And there are some great documentaries on YouTube by this channel called Code Joy. I'll probably post it in the notes, where they document open source projects like React, Mongo, Elastic, full documentaries. And the friction you see even for open source projects getting adopted is intense, because most of the companies right now, they've started doing, if you look at Apache, they take most of the popular open source projects and they say, okay, we're going to put in the Apache Foundation. If you see a lot of the big companies, they do open source projects of their core, very, very good feature functionality to be able to say, I'm going to adopt developers, which is why building a dev tools company right now is hard, but it's realistic. But back to you, Paras, on this one, LangChain. So LangChain,
Yeah,
you
just one last comment before we move on from this. I think when you see closed source SaaS companies, you get, I think, thousands, 10,000, maybe even a million examples of success. But when we talk about this model, I mean, you pointed out a few, but there are far and few in between.
Sure.
So to me, this requires deep thinking of, just because a model can be called as open source and open core doesn't mean it's necessarily like a good strategy to go. And as you said, now there's so many GitHub projects that even standing apart just because you've published someone's your code doesn't give you an edge unless it's very strategically thought about. And even then, the stabilities case shows that even then it's very difficult to make a business out of it.
Yep, completely agree.
Yeah, I think
So
the last, yeah,
give
just
a so talk a little bit about LangChain and Pinecone. LangChain allows you to put your vector embeddings in Pinecone as a vector. Paras, you want
yeah.
to talk about
So
it?
in my new company, we're actually using both. Pinecone is a vector storage database, and what vector means is vector is a series of numbers. So if you have a text like a paragraph or a sentence, you put it into a model like GPT-3 or any other language model, and the last layer of that model gives you a series of numbers. So if there's 100 say output neurons, you'll get 100 set of numbers. So those numbers represent what this text is all about. It's essentially storing of the essence of, if it's an image, it shows what the image is about. So vectorizing is that these numbers. You can do lots of amazing things on these numbers, but the like the most obvious thing is to do semantic search. So like if you type in I need a blue pair of jeans, and there's no description in your database about blue jeans, then semantic search can also allow you to actually literally look at the image of jeans and find out which are blue jeans, because their vectors are going to be very similar. So when you see how similar vectors are, they essentially mean how similar they are in concepts. So that's what Pinecone does. LangChain allows you to just make it extremely simple to interact with all these ecosystem in large language models. Yeah. There's
Right.
another company actually, I think it's called Fixie.
Uh, Fixie is basically so actually before Fixie, have you seen the new
But I mean, the point I was making, they raised a $17 million.
So Hugging Face released this new model called Hugging GPT, which is basically the same multimodal input, and you can do agent recognition at downstream, and you can sort of pass different commands from one context to another. So one of the problems with current LLM at ChatGPT is basically it's contextless and memoryless, which is what Fixie did. And the pace of innovation across this spectrum is so fast. Like in SaaS, what used to be year is a day. Like last 2 days, I've not been following Saturday and Sunday. And Monday, tomorrow morning, when I wake up, I'm like, fuck, I've grown up in a different new world. Go to
Yeah.
Hugging GPT.
Yeah. But I'll tell you on this, actually, before we move on there, on this, what they've done is something which actually very easy to do technically, because they're using underlying models like GPT-3, which is just an API, and they're connecting with like Google Calendar and so on. So all this is something which is not novel. They've given a good user interface on it. But I feel the reason they've been able to raise $17 million is not because of
I
product,
think
but
one part Paras yahan par. So if you
because
see
of promise. So if you
the
see
video,
the team, I
nahin,
think
last part of the
what
video, Paras, I'll disagree. So when they say add Matt to calendar, that context resolution of who Matt
but
is a
that is what GPT-3 is doing, Pallav.
nahin. That is why
If
the
you
I'm assuming the knowledge tree and the entity doesn't.
no, that is what the whole framework of agents in GPT-3. If you Google, I think I might
That
have
is
a
on the
link.
model search. No, but who is Matt is a more important question.
See,
How do you resolve that?
the model is extremely simple. So this of the whole point of tools, giving large language model tools like Calculate, Wikipedia, you can give large language model these tools, and this is I think 25 line code, and large language model
This
can
is
start
on
on doing
the
that.
outsourcing to the models, which is the router. But when you say add Matt to calendar, the context of Matt, I think this is what Pixel is doing sort of well to be able to know
Yeah, I
what.
mean, it is a lot of plumbing. So you do need plumbing. For example, you need plumbing of taking all your contacts from Google Contact Book, Gmail, and trying to sort out who Matt is. But the point is, it's not a research sort of a thing. It's not. I mean, it is something which could have happened even with before GPT-3. That's what I'm saying.
Correct.
Which
That is
is,
what
and also it is not like a moat right now.
uh,
Surprisingly, I feel this is something which is what OpenAI will end up doing with their ChatGPT plugins. But the point I was trying to make was, I feel the $17 million is not given to the product but the team. If you see, the team is AML leader at Apple, and then computer science professor of computer science at Harvard. So these are fantastic people, and the bet is on people when it comes to the seed stage, and not really on the product.
search, open a new tab, search Accept and Hugging GPT, Jarvis, ERXIV, Hugging
Yeah,
GPT,
I see it.
and ARXIV, the paper, not GitHub. Uh,
I think they have a paper somewhere here.
nahi,
Yeah.
gonna see the diagram on top of this. Basically, beautiful model they have created also. Yes.
Yeah,
This
this
one.
one, right?
Yes. This one actually also below. So, and they have the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, actually one more image below, which basically talks about the 4 phases of execution of Jarvis. Here, yeah, this one. Task
Yeah.
planning, model selection, task execution, and response generation. This is sort of part of the AGI that we are talking about.
Yeah, true. Have you seen? I think there is this task dialogue also.
No, haven't seen.
Was it task dialogue
There's a
or
visual GPT, which was multimodal input by Microsoft.
I'm not remembering the name, but
Give me a sense, I'll tell you.
sorry.
Give me a sense.
It was about Microsoft is making this API marketplace that LLMs can interact with. So it is very similar to this. Yeah, task matrix.
Oh, task matrix. Oh yeah, this paper is also very good. Task matrix on Arcsync. Search.
Yeah.
Beautiful diagram on that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, so
So
to me, the way trends are going, it's an
no, but this
ecosystem
one.
of.
So if you go back to the problems, so go to the last
See,
page. We have
this seems scary. Completing
right.
tasks by
So
connecting millions
just
of
go
APIs.
till the last page. Go to the last page. The inherent complications with this, and they have 4 points on this. Read this paper. So one of the core problems with this is how do you figure out the right API in the model to be able to figure out.
Yeah, but I think as a background for people who are listening to this, what we are talking about is giving large language models like GPT-3 access to in case of this paper, other machine learning models, and in case of this second paper by Microsoft, APIs, millions of APIs. So what essentially is happening is using, I mean, the first stage of GPT was all about using GPT for generating output itself. So you ask what is the capital of India, and out would come an answer called Delhi. And now what's happening is people are delinking several things. They are delinking memory, so they're retrieving context depending on questions. So if you ask what is the capital of India, they will get the extract from Wikipedia India entry and feed it into GPT-3 so that it doesn't have to rely on its own memory, but it can rely on external memory. That's the one thing that's happening. And second, they're also delinking reasoning from execution. So instead of just large language model outputting it automatically that Delhi is the capital of India, it actually sends and queries something else. So for example, it will query the web. And in this case, it's querying other machine learning models. So to me, that's what I was saying, Pallav, the way things are moving, just like we have World Wide Web of pages interconnected in, HTTP, one hyperlink leads to another. To me, this is how it's evolving. One model is getting linked to another, and they'll be like World Wide Web of these AIs
And
will talk to each other.
actually, there's one more beautiful paper you want to. Have you heard of the reflection paper?
Yeah, it is like feeding back.
Self-correcting code, which is
Yeah.
basically feeding back to GPT, and there's sort of like a.
And this goes back to what we were talking about, right? Right now, I think limitation of large language models is they're just forward pass only. But if
Yeah.
you feed back their own output to themselves, they become much more powerful.
Yeah. Can we load that tab? REFLEXION, just for people to know. Reflection X Arcsync. Beautiful autonomous agent, and they also have this memory and state management.
Yeah, amazing.
What happens with Gen AI developing code? What's your thought?
I think my thought is these AI models like Codex and Copilot, they make people who are good at programming even better. So they are sort of like tools for people who are good at what they do to do even better. In that sense, I feel the people who will benefit most from, for example, people who benefit most from mid journeys, people who already have an artistic eye. So Akanksha uses mid journey and she's so good at it because she is an artist. And similarly with GPT-3, people who've been good at writing, they're going to benefit the most because it becomes like a sparring partner. They know what to ask, they know what to incorporate, what not to incorporate. So um, so to me, one is that the bar of what is good quality software will go high because good developers will be much more productive. They'll be able to build better software faster. Uh, in that sense, I don't feel it's going to make people who are just at the beginning of their coding or who are mediocre any better, because the same person is like a top 1 percentile developer will be able to produce a lot more at a higher quality than the bottom 99% just inching a little bit up. So
They get the bottom 99.
sorry.
From a context of services industry, will the bottom 99 be augmented or killed?
I wish they're augmented, but I fear the latter.
So Goldman had a report where they said 300 million jobs will be displaced or dislocated, including paralegals, content marketers, content writers, some teachers, and all of that. And some part of the history says that every time there's been a new technological innovation, people figure out a new job. But now, if the dislocation is at such a major pace, because the acceleration of change, which is what we're talking about, is so fast, how do people sort of reflect and sort of retrain back on this?
Yeah, I think one thing I worry about in terms of past analogy is where it's a little bit applicable is now the most of the economy is about trying to win over human attention. Human attention is becoming the limiting constraint. There is only so much of human attention going around, and with people spending 5 to 6 hours on Instagram, TikTok every day, I mean, you can't have 25 hours in a day, right? So in that sense, I worry if there is an upper limit to the amount of economic output the world can absorb, and if there is an upper limit to the amount of output world can absorb, then there's an upper limit to how many jobs can exist, right? So if there is a single company who can personalize perfect content for 7 billion people, Pallav gets his own feed, which is amazing. I get my own feed, that's amazing. Then why would you care to go and seek? So in that sense, I mean, new jobs getting created made sense when, say, the population was growing, when we had more and more needs. I mean, essentially, I think it comes down to philosophical question whether human needs are infinite or whether they are finite. I think when it comes to status goods, they're effectively infinite because you can always like try to vie for higher and higher status. But for many other things, I think it is finite. After a period of time, you're done.
So yeah, mimetic desires, we're not going to talk about it, but like the crux of it, like while people say ki, hey, people find new jobs, the only question I keep asking myself is, if that was so true, why do people in Western countries, and I'm not talking about the coastal areas, but a lot of people are like, hey, even with 2 jobs, I'm struggling to make my ends meet. And there have been surveys about like, we can't do $400 on an emergency for about 46% of US population. So it's going to be interesting debate, but okay, we're going to cut it off today, Paras. So here's a request to you listeners. This is an experiment me and Paras we did for the first time. And personally, we both enjoyed. Here's one favor I'm going to ask from all of you. Number one, tell us what you liked about it, what you did not like. Number two, if you have topics you want us to discuss on the next one, please let us know in the comments. And number three, if you have a guest in mind, let us know. Paras is very popular. He can pull anybody in the world to get on this podcast. Just let us know. Till then, goodbye. Adios.
Thanks, Pallav. Yeah, and I had a ball. And let's talk to you the next time.
Yes, next week it is, Paras.
Yes.
See you.
Yeah, bye. See you.